Hello Year 11, and today's lesson is on natural selection. So as always, can you complete the retrieval practice? Please give yourself 3 to 4 minutes, pause the screencast while you answer the questions. When you've completed them, unpause and mark with a green pen if you've got one, with any pen if you haven't. Okay, off you go. Okay, so here are the answers. So number 1, the genetic material is found in the nucleus. Number 2, in the human body cell there are 46 chromosomes. Number 3, human gametes has 23 chromosomes. Remember the gametes are the egg and sperm. The sex chromosomes are X and Y, so girls have XX, boys have XY. The parents' genotypes are capital L, lowercase l for both. That's because they are heterozygous. And the chances of them having a long-fingered offspring is 3 out of 4, or you could have put 75%. Okay, so moving on. Today's lesson is on natural selection, so we're going to talk about the process of natural selection, and hopefully you will then be able to apply that process to any situation or question that you get asked about natural selection. So we're going to start by just making sure you understand what I mean by the word variation. So variation are differences. So just like the word variety in the English language, a variety means differences between things. So you might get a variety of crisp flavours. You might get a variety of colours on a colour palette when you're doing art. So variety means differences. So for variation in biology, environmental variation are the different characteristics caused by the environment, and genetic variation is the variation caused by your genes. And please remember that some characteristics, or some of the different characteristics between us, can be the result of both. So can be caused by not only the environment, but also by your genes. So if you could jot those two definitions down and then draw the table. So you might want to pause the screencast as you draw the table. And then I'd just like you to try and put examples in all 3 columns. So I'll give you one example for each, and then you can have a go at adding others yourself. So an environmental variation example would be scars. You are not born with a scar. That is because of your environment. So you could put scars in the environmental column. Genetic would be eye colour. Okay, your eye colour is not to do with the environment. It is because of your genes. So eye colour would be genetic. And an example of both would be, for example, weight. So yes, if somebody eats a lot of food, they will have a higher body mass. Okay, but it can be due to genetic factors as well. Okay, so I would put height and weight in the both column. Have a go at putting some other examples in though. So where would you put hair colour? Where would you put IQ, so your intelligence level? Where would you put your blood type? Which column would you put hair length? Which column would you put shoe size? What else could we say? Which column would you put skin colour in? So try and take those examples and add them to your table and see if you can come up with any other examples yourself. Okay, now we hopefully are clear of what variation is, because that's really important in this process of natural selection, and it allows natural selection to occur. We are now going to talk about what is natural selection. So a definition which you might want to jot down is that natural selection is a process where organisms that are better adapted to an environment will survive and reproduce. Okay, so I'll say that again. Natural selection is a process where organisms that are better adapted to an environment will survive and reproduce. And what that means is, if they survive and they reproduce, they will pass on those beneficial genes, those beneficial alleles. So I've broken this down on this slide for you into 4 stages, because if you can talk about these 4 stages in an exam question and apply it to the actual exam question, so whether they're talking about giraffes or whether they're talking about mice or whether they're talking about horses, if you always include these 4 points, you will definitely get full marks. Okay, so starting off with variation. Now, we've just talked about variation, and we should know that there is variation within a species. So that means that there will be differences within a species caused by genes, which gives us different phenotypes. So your genes will be different to my genes, will be different to somebody else's genes. Therefore, we have different different characteristics. So we've got different coloured hair, we've got different coloured eyes, we've got different coloured skin. Okay, that's variation. And within animals, they might have some animals might have longer legs, some animals might have shorter legs. Okay, that is variation. So that is why natural selection can occur. What then happens then is that the animals within that species or the plants that have got the characteristics that are most suited to the environment will survive. Okay, so you might have, for example, giraffes. Giraffes with longer necks were able to survive because they could get the leaves from the top of the trees, whereas the giraffes with the shorter necks, they couldn't reach. And because they couldn't reach, they couldn't get food. And because they couldn't get food, they couldn't survive, they died. Okay, which is why we've ended up with a species of giraffes that have got long necks. Now, those that survive can obviously then reproduce so that they can breed. They can breed with other animals, other of their species, to make offspring. And if they can make offspring, what can they do? They can pass on those beneficial alleles, those beneficial genes, the ones that have enabled them to survive. So with the giraffe example, the giraffes that have been able to survive with the long necks, they will reproduce with other giraffes with long necks, and they have offspring that have got long necks. Okay. Now, obviously, again, a little bit like selective breeding, this doesn't happen overnight. It can happen over many, many, many generations, but you end up with a species with characteristics that are beneficial for their environment. So if you make sure you've got these 4 points down and learn them, because if you can apply these 4 points, variation, survival, reproduction, alleles, if you can apply those 4 points to any question about natural selection, you will gain the marks. Okay, right, a little bit of a progress check for you next then. Have a look at these images. Okay, I'll give you a little description so you know what you're looking for. We have got an animal there at the in the first diagram on the left hand side. Some of the animal have got really long legs, some of the animal have got really short legs. Now look at the second picture. Which animals are able to run away? Okay, and if they can run away, they're surviving, aren't they? Okay, which animals couldn't run away? Now, if you look at the last picture, you have then got more animals with what? More of them got longer legs or shorter legs? Which beneficial allele has been passed on? Okay, now have a go at using the 4 points from the previous slide and answer that question. Use your knowledge of natural selection to explain what is happening in the above pictures. So make sure you include a point about variation, make sure you include a point about survival, one about reproduction, and then one about those successful alleles. Okay? 4 or 5 minutes, off you go. Pause the screencast. Okay, so this is what you should have written down. So variation, what is the variation within that first image? What's different between them? Okay, what is different is that some of those animals have been born with long legs, okay, and some have been born with shorter legs. That is variation. Okay, so that would be your first mark. The second mark is that you can see that the ones with the longest legs are outrunning the predators, so they're getting away. They are surviving. And unfortunately, the ones with the shorter legs have been eaten. They're not surviving. Okay? So, third point, The ones with the long legs, because they have survived, they are around, they are still on the planet, therefore they can reproduce. Okay, and the fourth point is, because they are reproducing, there is a possibility that they will pass on the allele for the long legs to their offspring, and therefore a larger proportion of the population will now have longer legs. Okay, so that is natural selection. The characteristic that is more beneficial is now being passed on. The characteristic that is less beneficial won't be passed on. Okay, now there's another question there. What do you think would happen to the predators as a result? Well, hopefully you've thought about the fact that if you've then got the prey that have got the longer legs, they will be able to survive more, they'll be able to run away more, so possibly the predators will need to find alternative food source, or their numbers may decline because they're not able to catch those animals with the longer legs. Okay, a little checkpoint for you now, which is just a true or false. So if you could pause the screencast and write A, B, C, D, E into your book or onto a piece of paper, and have a go at answering these. Do you think they are true or false? Okay, here are the answers then. So natural selection is a process where organisms that are better adapted to an environment will survive. That is true. Part B, natural selection increases the number of weaker genes. That is false. Those weaker genes should be part of the organisms that do die and therefore cannot reproduce and therefore cannot pass on their genes or alleles. Part C, natural selection allows stronger individuals to survive. That is true. And part D, natural selection is a fast process. This does not happen overnight. This can take many generations. So that is false. And part E, natural selection allows the fittest individuals to survive and reproduce and pass on the desirable characteristics. That is also true. Okay, so make sure you've marked those. Make sure any that you haven't got right, you have a read and have a think about again. Okay. We are now going to move on to the last part now, which is another little progress check, so another little opportunity for you to apply your knowledge of natural selection to an exam question. Okay, so.
Okay, so here is the last part of this little lesson. The task is for you to apply your knowledge of natural selection to this question. The woods around Manchester only became polluted with blackened tree trunks during the Industrial Revolution around 1850. Use the theory of natural selection to explain why the dark form of the moth became much more common. Okay, in this question, you definitely need to mention variation. So look at the variation of the moths. You definitely need to mention the fact which one will survive when the trunks are darker. You definitely need to mention which will then reproduce, and then also that mention alleles. The hint I will give you is that this bird in the top corner up here will eat these moths. Now, which will it eat? When the trunks were lighter, which moth was eaten? When the trunks got darker, which moth was eaten? Okay, so that's a little bit of a clue for you. Apply those 4 things that we've talked about all the way through this lesson. Have a really good go. If you want to send your answers to me, please do, and I will mark them for you. Okay, thank you for listening. Have a great day.